Across the world, grocery chains and big box retailers overwhelmingly dominate the single market they operate in, often foregoing any expansion beyond their territory. Here in the UK, Tesco's, Sainsbury's and Asda collectively make up over half of household grocery spending. In Canada, the big three grocery chains also have the market effectively cornered. Most EU countries have grocery oligopolies. And in Australia, just two companies, Coles and Woolworths, control a staggering 80% of the grocery market, as well as significant other interests in hardware, liquor, and even gambling. If an Australian spends $1, there is a pretty good chance it's either going to their landlord, their bank, or one of these two companies. And then in America, while on paper Walmart may not seem as dominant by market share alone, its local influence can be so great that it fundamentally changes local economies around its big box stores. But despite their national dominance, none of these companies really have the ability or the desire to operate beyond the market they dominate. You won't find a Tesco in the USA, a Woolworths in Canada, or a Loblaw in Australia, and that's because the simple practical economies of these businesses overwhelmingly favours being a big fish in a little pond that they can dominate with extreme economies of scale and regulatory hurdles. But in all of these markets, there is one exception. Aldi now operates over 13,000 stores in 18 countries, and on top of its dominating market share within its native Germany, it's now putting a lot of pressure on incumbents in other markets that were arguably getting a bit too comfortable. Now, maybe you might think this doesn't sound too unique. Other brands like 7-Eleven and Costco have also expanded beyond their home countries with great success. Walmart also operates in just as many countries in total. But 7-Eleven has targeted the ultra-convenient small order shopper, while Costco famously has a membership-based shopping for people who want to do bulk orders often planned months in advance. Walmart's international operations also aren't nearly as aggressive as Aldi's are, and it tries to hide these operations behind localized branding, often for good reason. Of the countries Walmart has moved into, most have been developing economies without strong existing competition, and even with Walmart's immense financial power, their successes have been mixed at best. Aldi, on the other hand, goes right down the middle, competing directly with the market leaders on their own turf, at their own game for everyday regular household groceries. And the thing is, it's doing it really well. So what's the difference here? Well, the first thing you need to understand is why national grocery chains overwhelmingly trend towards extremely localized consolidation in the first place. And once you understand those rules, it becomes easier to understand how Aldi is breaking them. Now, I respect your time, so if you're already familiar with the economic dynamics of grocery chains and you only want to know how Aldi is doing these things differently, feel free to skip ahead to this timestamp. The first obvious driver towards consolidating markets is the price competitiveness that can be achieved through economies of scale. And you're probably already familiar with this general concept, but the way it applies to supermarkets in particular is uniquely fascinating. Groceries are one of the most price-sensitive markets in the economy. If people notice they can get their weekly food bills down by going to a different store, they will overwhelmingly do it, especially if that other store is larger and offers a wider variety of products. Dynamic pricing, networked warehousing, optimized logistics, big data, and supplier bargaining power are all tools available to large chains that aren't available to smaller operators. When it comes to expenses like facilities and staffing, big is beautiful. Larger chains are able to pull from a wider pool of manpower and spread it more uniformly across their operation. Even their rent can be surprisingly negotiable. Commercial landlords will give preferential rental agreements to national grocery chains because they know they draw foot traffic into their centre, so they can charge other businesses more for a shopfront alongside these tentpole stores. Even with all of these advantages though, big grocery businesses run on incredibly tight margins, so even if an independent grocer was willing to accept lower margins, they often still wouldn't be able to compete without actively losing money on every item they sold. Now, I know for most of you watching this kind of video, economies of scale isn't exactly that surprising. But if bigger really is better when it comes to being competitive in this market, why do these companies almost always stay within their borders? Most companies of this size selling consumer goods try to move into as many new markets as possible to access new customers and further scale their operations, but grocers largely don't. And there are 3 basic reasons why. The first is that international scale doesn't give as much advantage as you might think to businesses that still need local supply networks for perishable products. Walmart can't set up a distribution center in America to supply fresh vegetables to stores in Europe, so they'd have to build up that capacity from scratch. The second reason is that each of these businesses has perfectly adapted to their local market. Walmart has mass convenience stores built for car-centric American cities. Tesco has adapted to unique British cuisine, and in all of these markets, they have integrated their shopping loyalty programs with discounted fuel deals, reward points, insurance, and a host of other local industries. Local laws, cultural preferences, city designs, the size of the country, and even the climate they operate in all dictate slightly different optimizations to dominate a specific market and cater to local customer bases. These businesses naturally evolve over time to become the apex predator for their specific ecosystem. But if you put a polar bear in the Amazon rainforest, it's not going to be able to compete with the locals that are just better adapted to that environment. Now, the third barrier that normally keeps these businesses confined to their specific economy has less to do with the economics and more to do with politics. Regulators and the people they serve normally don't like the idea of something as essential as the food they put on their table coming from a foreign country. A lot of these companies may be predatory market dominators, but they are our predatory market dominators. If a company like Walmart took significant market share anywhere in Europe, it would just be liable to attract more scrutiny than a local brand, even if they're both ultimately owned by the same pool of international investors. Now, beyond just being incredibly difficult and risky, it's also those same investors that make international expansion downright undesirable. Yes, a company that opens in a new country could access a new customer base to grow their revenue, but even if everything went perfectly, it would still represent a significant upfront investment that could have just been paid back to shareholders through dividends or stock buybacks. When Tesco announced a plan to expand into the US, shareholders explicitly put pressure on the board and senior management to strategically review that option closely, where it was later found to be a bad allocation of shareholder capital. This also ignores the simple reality that if a British shareholder wanted to make the investment needed to move to the American grocery market, they could just invest in the existing American grocers. Even in markets without strong existing competition and significant opportunities, investor appetite for international expansion is just not there. When Walmart acquired India's Flipkart as a beachhead to expand into the rapidly growing Indian economy, its shares slid and investors overwhelmingly just wanted the company to stick to what it was good at. So these are the basic rules that make for a successful national grocery chain. Market power within an area, obtained by huge investments into optimizing business operations to suit that local market. The reason it's so common across so many countries is because it works. If businesses do this correctly, it makes it almost impossible for anybody else to compete in their territory, except for Aldi. So how is it that a local grocer from Germany was able to fight and win on multiple continents? Well, there are some simple, practical business reasons why. These rules just don't apply to them. This video is sponsored by Odoo. Running a business is hard, and keeping everything organized and moving efficiently is a big part of that. If you're still just manually writing emails and updating spreadsheets to keep track of everything, you need Odoo. Odoo integrates all of your business operations, your CRM, accounting, sales, inventory. All of your apps share data, so your whole business can be run through Odoo's easy integrated dashboard. It's incredibly flexible and fits right into your business, letting you plan your production cycles and organize inventory. And because it's all integrated, your sales data will prompt you to make more inventory orders at just the right time, so you're never scrambling to put out fires. If you want to fit your business with a rocket booster, you can try Odoo today with a free 15-day trial without a credit card. And you only need to select the apps that you need, and you can get any single app for free when you sign up at my link in the description. If you haven't guessed by now, despite looking largely the same as a regular grocery store, selling a lot of the same items and competing for roughly the same customers, Aldi is a very different company under the surface, which has allowed them to break the common competitive meta in 3 distinct ways. The first big difference is that Aldi's business structure is built like a financial fortress. The company itself is actually 2 companies, Aldi Nord and Aldi Sud, North and South respectively. Depending on where you live, you may only be familiar with one of these logos, although they do share the same name and general operations. The company was split like this back in the 1960s. While the exact reason for this division has remained uncertain, a leading theory is that the 2 founding brothers had a disagreement about whether or not their existing stores at the time should sell cigarettes. Instead of coming to an agreement, they just split the company in 2, with one brother claiming territory in the north of Germany and the other claiming the south. This was also back when Germany itself was split east to west by the Iron Curtain, but after the 1990s, the 2 separate groups expanded eastward, forming what's known today in Germany simply as the Aldi Equator. Now, despite this almost petty solution to a small disagreement, the 2 companies do still operate collaboratively. They carefully divide up territory, they share product development, and when one moves into a new country, the other stays out of it. Germany is the only single economy where both exist side by side, at least for now, but more on that later. In addition to this strange 2 groups, 1 brand arrangement, both of these companies are still privately held by foundations, which are in turn owned by the descendants of the founders themselves, with no outside shareholders. The Albrechts are one of the wealthiest families in the world, and of course they are profit motivated, but because they own both of the companies in their entirety, they can treat it very differently to public companies of the same size, which is legally just a machine to generate returns for shareholders. The foundations themselves also have hard-written rules about how the business can be operated, so even if the heirs to the Aldi companies wanted to change how the business was run, they don't actually have that much direct control. The families, while incredibly private, also maintain a good relationship with one another and want to maintain the current operating arrangement. This all means that unlike almost any other national grocery chain, there's been an unspoken agreement that they couldn't dominate the entire market, pushing them to look for more opportunities abroad. But more than just providing them with the motivation, it also gave them the ability to do so as well. Both of the Aldi groups effectively have 0 long-term debt. They own most of the stores and warehouses they operate out of, and they maintain large cash reserves beyond what would typically be required to float their day-to-day operations. This might sound like the ideal way to run a business, but it does mean in the short term that they are leaving some money on the table. By contrast, most public companies with regular shareholders to answer to don't want to hold on to too many assets or too much cash, because short-term returns can be made significantly higher with leverage and leasing. If both Aldi and a regular publicly listed grocery chain had $1 million, Aldi would buy a single store, pay upfront for all of its equipment and inventory, and then put the remainder in the bank to make sure they have enough cash on hand to cover expenses between busy periods. A regular company with shareholders demanding good quarterly results would take that same money and use it to secure 10 leased locations, make a down payment on financed equipment, acquire inventory with negative working capital, and secure a line of credit to fund their day-to-day operations. With the money they have left over, they could pay out a dividend, do a stock buyback, or just open up even more locations. Now, with those 10 locations, that regular corporate grocer has a much greater opportunity to make significantly higher returns on their investment, but they do leave themselves exposed to a business like Aldi. Interest on loans and rent on facilities are all expenses that eat into the already thin margins on the grocery business. Walmart, which compared to a lot of other national chains is run pretty conservatively, has interest and rental expenses that are approximately 0.75% of their total annual revenue combined. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but last year the company as a whole had a profit margin of just 3%, so this is not an insignificant cost. Aldi, on the other hand, does not have traditional shareholders demanding maximized short-term performance, so it has been able to make strategic investments to eliminate these expenses, which has in turn allowed them to compete on price even in markets where they don't have the same market dominance. Aldi's business model is built like a double brick brownstone from the early 1900s. It's a big investment, but it's incredibly resilient and should last forever. Most other national grocery chains are built like modern apartment complexes held together with drywall and dreams. Now, this sounds like an insult to other grocery chains, but it really isn't. This model is far more effective at generating economic returns in the short term, and again, this means that Aldi has significant real estate holdings that are highly specialized. A lot of regular shareholders wouldn't find that attractive, because if they wanted to invest into real estate, they would, again, just invest in real estate, not buy shares in a grocery company. On the other hand, the diversified assets of the two Aldi corporations are really just the diversified assets of the family who owns them. The business could cease operating tomorrow and they would still have billions of dollars worth of commercial real estate and other assets. Now, ironically, this slow and steady approach to reinvestment into building assets and avoiding debt has actually given them the financial foundations to scale up very rapidly. Today, Aldi is one of the fastest growing retailers in the world. In 2023, Aldi South was able to purchase Winn-Dixie and Harvey's in the United States to complement its own self-branded stores. At the same time, Aldi North owns Trader Joe's, making the USA technically the only other country where both Aldi North and South operate in the same market, although Aldi South is the only one with actual Aldi branded locations. Acquiring these other companies represented large investments, but since Aldi's is not in a rush to get its cash back to investors, it was just seen as easier than securing all of these locations individually. And it is these locations the company was after. The actual brand name and operations of Winn-Dixie and Harvey's were deemed to be inferior to Aldi's own, so by 2027 their existing stores will be fully converted into regular Aldi locations, which, on top of being an indication of just how rapidly the company is growing, also gives you a hint as to the other reason it's been able to have success where others can't. The second major advantage that Aldi has when going toe-to-toe with incumbent grocery chains is what it does without. Their stores are infamously stripped back using standardized designs that are replicated around the world. Now, just 5 minutes ago, we were talking about how that standardization would make other grocery chains uncompetitive in different markets, but Aldi has made it work by picking areas that will fit their model rather than making their model fit an area. Their stores tend to be smaller and fit in well alongside foot traffic, public transportation, and light car usage. Even in America, they don't try to create car-centric superstores to compete directly with Walmart's. They instead just open stores in areas where their more compact footprint will let them slot in between a small convenience store and a big box center. This small size is also helped by the number of individual items they actually sell in each store. In a country like Australia, the market leaders, Coles and Woolworths, stock around 20,000 unique items in every store. Tesco's and Sainsbury's here in the UK stock around 30,000 individual items, and the average Walmart location stocks over 120,000, although their inventory does extend beyond just groceries. Aldi stores by comparison regularly have fewer than 2,000 SKUs, made up primarily of their own white label products and a small selection of locally sourced favorites. This is a shockingly small selection even compared to a store like Costco, which differentiates itself through wholesale bulk items. This pared down selection of products makes inventory management cheaper, it means that fewer staff are needed to stock shelves, it means their inventory turns over faster, avoiding shrinkage, and it also means that even with smaller market share in the overall market, they can still be a significant purchaser of the goods they're actually sourcing. Now, you might logically ask, if cutting down on a bloated inventory gives Aldi such a competitive edge, why don't all these other grocery chains do the same thing? Well, the simple answer is that they would love to, but they're afraid if they do, they will lose market share to their other competitors. If Tesco stocks Mr. Beast's Feastables, but Sainsbury's doesn't, then everybody with a brain-rotted 12-year-old is going to be screamed at until they go to Tesco. So Sainsbury's will need to stock the item to get back this valuable demographic. This backs most stores into a prisoner's dilemma of stocking more individual items than they need because they know their competitor will do the same, and Aldi just doesn't care. Its shoppers are willing to accept the smaller selection and more basic shopping experience because it allows them to offer lower prices or just because they like the store. And that really is the third secret ingredient that has allowed Aldi to thrive on hostile shores. People just like it. Public perception towards most nationally dominant grocery chains is overwhelmingly negative. They generally pay staff poorly, attract attention for pricing dishonesty, all while being the most obvious budgetary burden for regular shoppers. Aldi, on the other hand, has a reputation for paying and treating its staff well, being fairer with pricing, as well as having little quirks that people find endearing rather than annoying. Now, these intangibles matter because apart from giving them loyal shoppers, it also means that their stores can operate in foreign markets with less scrutiny than a typical overseas chain would receive. Now, this is still a profit-motivated business owned by an incredibly wealthy family who would like their money to turn into more money. But because they're operating it for long-term stability over short-term returns, their operations are generally less hostile to the overall human experience, which, compared to a lot of other companies, makes them come across like a saint by comparison. The only other retailer that people like nearly as much is Costco, but as much as I hate to be the one to tell you, that's all part of their business strategy too, so go and watch this video next to find out how.